another episode of Throwing It Back with Sean Farrell. I am Sean Farrell. God is great all the time. All the time, God is great. Jesus Christ is King. He died and rose again. Let's go ahead and get into it. Okay, so there was something that happened during the 1992 playoffs that speaks to the dysfunction. That speaks to the inconsistency that was the Indiana and the Pacers in the early 90s. I have it pulled up. Here it goes. Yeah, okay. So it was the 1992 NBA playoffs, okay? And George McCloud had played in the first two games, okay? All of a sudden in game 3, he had gotten injured. And he got injured in the weirdest way possible, okay? He got injured in the weirdest way possible, okay? So he injured his ankle, okay? And he was unable to play in game 3. But the way he injured it is going to have probably you who are watching this laughing, okay? It's unfortunate, but it's funny too, okay? So, prior to Game 3 of the 1992 Eastern Conference First Round Series between the Indiana Pacers and Boston Celtics, George McCloud suffered a bizarre and unusual injury when he sprained his ankle after getting up awkwardly from a phone call. That is bizarre. When you sprain your ankle getting up from talking on the phone. Anyway, before Game 3 of the series against Boston, McCloud stood up awkwardly or moved funnily while finishing a phone call, resulting in a sprained ankle. The sprain was so severe enough to sideline him for the game, forcing him to watch in street clothes as the Pacers faced the elimination. Okay. So, after the 1993 season, George McCloud was released. Okay, he was drafted by the Pacers in 1990. Okay, but never really lived up to what he could have became, and it's part of a larger point that I'm making on the Indiana Pacers teams of the early 90s. Okay. Let me see. This is an article that I saw. Or maybe not. Okay. All right. Give me 1 second. Give me one second. Okay. So, he was released after the 1993 season, okay? He was drafted 7th overall out of Florida State, struggled with injuries and high expectations, averaging only 5.5 points per game. Released after his initial 4-year contract expired, leading him to play in Italy before later resurrecting his career with the Dallas Mavericks. Okay? Yeah. So so in 1995 he signed with the Dallas Mavericks. Yeah. And later went on to play with the Phoenix Suns, the Denver Nuggets. Okay. But he got into fights with teammates. Roasted by Larry, fights with Reggie, crushed by tragedy, George McLeod, more than a Pacers bust. Yeah. I got to do some more digging on this story right here. But yeah, it's part of a larger point that I'm making about the Indiana and the Pacers, who were one of the most talented but most inconsistent teams. They went to, when they first joined the NBA in 1976. They went to the playoffs in 1981, lost to Philly. Went to the playoffs in 1987, lost to the Atlanta Hawks. Okay, and then didn't make the playoffs. In 1988, they lost on the last game of the season. Steve Stipanovich. Only hardcore basketball fans or basketball junkies remember Steve Stipanovich. He missed a game-winning shot in the final game of the season. That put the New York Knicks in the NBA playoffs instead of the Indiana Pacers. Okay, then they went 28-54 in 1989. That was the first year of Rick Smits. And Jack Ramsey started the season as head coach. Okay, he had been the head coach since 1987, but he started the season 0-7. Then he resigned after an 0-7 start. Then Mel Daniels took over for a few games, and then George Irvine took over for a few more games before they hired Dick Versace. Okay, now Dick Versace was still on Chuck Daly's staff when the 1989 season started. Okay, so think about this for a second. Okay, you're on your way to the NBA championship. Okay, you're on your way to the NBA championship, but you leave Chuck Daly's staff in the middle of the season to take over the Indiana Pacers, who were one of the worst teams in the league in 1989, okay? I imagine Dick Versace has a bit of regret not staying with the Detroit Pistons the whole season and winning that championship, okay? I initially thought that he had left Chuck Daly's staff after the 1988 season, okay? But he was still on staff in 1989. Midway through 89, he leaves Chuck Daly's staff, which is just weird. But, oh well, he did it. But the Pacers improved in 1990. Went 42-40, lost to the Detroit Pistons in the first round. Then Dick Versace got fired a couple of games into the 1991 season after an 8-16 start. Okay, Bob Hill took over. Pacers played well, took the Celtics to 5 games in 1991. They could have won that series if Chuck Person had not missed a game-winning 3. Okay, but they got off to a bad start again in 1992. Okay, they were at one point 15-28 in 1992, but they rallied to go 40-42, and they drew the Celtics again in the first round, and they got swept out of the playoffs by the Celtics, 3-0. And Hubie Brown made an interesting point after they had gotten swept out of the playoffs for the second straight year by the Celtics. Here it is.
A devastating loss in overtime after having a substantial lead in Boston definitely affected this team. Bob Hill said he thought they had overcome that, but obviously not so. The game did not go Indiana's way, and now this is a franchise with general manager, coach, and players under some pressure here in Indianapolis, as for the second time in the past 2 years, they have been eliminated in the first round, as you see, both times to the Celtics, and only 3 victories ever in the playoffs.
Well, you see, here's another decision. In 1990, they won 42 games. In 1991, 41. In 1992, only 40. They are regressing, and everyone feels that there's a lot of talent here, especially 1 through 10. Now, you look at it and you say, what's wrong? Well, they always seem...
Yeah, so Hubie Brown, boy, that guy really knows basketball. Doesn't he? Yeah, and he said the Pacers were regressing, a lot of talent. They just probably didn't have the right coach. Then they go 41-41 in 1993. They never should have been in the playoffs in 1993. Okay, they never should have been in the playoffs in 1993. The Orlando Magic were supposed to be there. Okay, the Orlando Magic were supposed to be in the playoffs because they were 41-41 too. So what they had to do was they had to go all the way back to a preseason game that they played, the Pacers and the Magic. And I believe it was by percentage points that the Indiana Pacers got in. Percentage points. It was just that close. So they never should have been in the playoffs in 1993, and they got kicked out in the first round by the Knicks. Okay, and so they just probably didn't have the right coach to lead them. So Bob Hill gets fired, goes on to be an assistant, ironically, with the Orlando Magic. Then they bring in Larry Brown, and Bob Hill returns to a full-time head coaching position with the Spurs in 1995. Okay, so so Bob Hill first became a head coach with the Knicks. Ironically, he replaced Hubie Brown midway through the 86-87 season. Then was an assistant with Dick Versace, replaced Dick Versace. Was an assistant with the Orlando Magic under Brian Hill for the 1994 season. And now he's head coach of the San Antonio Spurs for the 1995 season, okay? So, yeah. I just don't think Bob Hill was the right man to lead the host players at that particular time. And neither was Dick Versace, too. So, yeah. Yeah.
It went down to the final tiebreaker between us and the Indiana Pacers to see who would make the 8th spot, and Indiana got in.
To Purdue, and he's fouled going to the hoop. Technical foul. Who's it on? Got to be Person. He kicked the ball into the stands. He just kicked the ball into the stands. He's been thrown out of the game. You know what? He's going to kick it again. He'll miss some games now. Whoa. Chuck Person, I'm sure, will miss a few games this week. Bill Oakes, the official, right in his face. Oh, man. Whoa. He kicked the ball in the stands twice, obviously showing up the officials. He's not only thrown out of this game, but it's going to cost him big money. Chuck Person had already kicked the ball into the stands. Then it was thrown back out, so he kicks it again.
Damn.
Melee would have been proud of that drive.
Yeah, so I just think the Indiana Pacers just didn't have the right coaches to get them to the level that they wanted to go. Between 1990 and 1993, they averaged around 41 wins, 41 wins a year. 42 in 1990, 41 in 91, 40 in 1992, 41 and 41 in 1993. Yeah, that's pretty inconsistent to me. So, all right, that's it, and that's all for Throwing It Back with Sean Farrell. I am out of here. May God bless us all.